Hey y'all, today we're going to talk about a big fancy word. And it might even be a word that's a little bit intimidating, like differentiation or scaffolding or Bloom's taxonomy. Now, we're not going to talk about any of those words, but we are going to talk about a word that you may or may not be familiar with, and that is anecdotal notes. Have you ever heard of anecdotal notes before? That's actually a word, anecdotal. It's actually really hard for me to say. So today we're going to talk about note-taking in the classroom. So one of the key components to guided math in a small group math lesson is actually taking anecdotal notes. Yet at the same time, there are so many teachers out there who don't know how to take them. And I actually think that it's because more than likely you've never been trained on how to do them, what are they for, why do you need to take them, and so much more. And so today we're going to talk about note-taking in the classroom, and hopefully you'll pick up a tip or two that will help you realize that taking anecdotal notes is actually not as scary as it sounds. So let's dive in. So you might be thinking, what are anecdotal notes? Well, I promise it's not as intimidating as it sounds. These notes are used to document your students' strengths and weaknesses that they might show during a given concept or during a small group lesson. These notes can be taken during independent practice, they can be taken at the small group table, or maybe just as you're walking around and maybe you're observing students in math stations. It's really informal, but these types of notes are actually really beneficial for your students. So let's talk about why. I cannot tell you how many times I have sat down at my small group table to write out my lesson plans for the week, and I'm like, oh, I forgot what such and such kid did last week, or I forgot how this kid did on this activity. And because we as educators, we have so many different things going on at all times. And if you're like me, you might have like 50 tabs open in your brain at one time. If I don't write it down, more than likely I will forget. So by taking notes and observing your students during small group instruction, it's going to help you reflect on student learning. You are going to be able to use those notes to help you identify your teaching points. Your teaching points are what you are going to use to plan out your future lessons so that the activities that you plan for small groups, the activities that you plan during math stations, they are going to align to your students' specific needs. By looking at these notes, they help you provide targeted instruction geared toward individual student needs. By using these notes, they can also provide guidance when it comes to grouping your students for small group instruction. It allows you to provide enrichment when it comes to reteaching certain concepts. These notes also allow you to keep a record of data for IEP meetings, parent meetings, and all the things that you know that we need to be collecting data for. While your anecdotal notes are very simple, they do need to include a few key elements, such as the student name. I actually like to write a student number rather than a name. That way that a student's name is not out there for any parent or anyone who might walk into my classroom. That way they do not have access to that information. You're also going to want to include the date of the lesson, the type of the lesson or the type of activity that student is working on. Or is it a small group lesson? Is it one-to-one? What is the setting of the student? Are they working at the small group table? Are they sitting on the carpet? Are they at their desk? So just kind of jotting down what their setting might be, because that does play into a key factor in student learning. You're also going to want to write down the standard or objective that is being taught. And if you want to write the objective of that lesson or activity, you can do that as well. Remember that you want to keep your sentences really short and sweet. They don't need to be big, lengthy paragraphs. You can even jot down a lot of your notes prior to even doing an informal observation with your student. And this is going to allow you to focus on the student learning objective whenever you are observing them. So some of the things that you might jot down or some of the things that you might look for whenever you're doing anecdotal notes with your students would be, do they understand proper use of vocabulary? Are there any misconceptions about that specific concept? Is there something that they struggle with? What is something that they excel at? Do they see patterns? Can they explain their thinking? What steps do you need to take for a future action plan in order to address misconceptions or to enrich their strengths? So those are just some things to keep in mind. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at an example set of notes that I have taken. Now, first, what I want you to realize is that this sample that I am including, this information is completely made up, so I am not sharing any real student data with you. This particular student was working on addition and subtraction with regrouping. They were solving a particular problem using base 10 blocks. So the problem that this student was trying to solve was 37 plus 17. The problem that this student was trying to solve was 32 plus 17. And they were to build out the add-ins of that problem using base 10 blocks. What I observed was that this student did not have a strong foundation in place value, which we know students need in order to be able to regroup. So instead of building out the number 32 with 3 10s and 2 1s, this student built out the number 5. So instead of distinguishing 3 as representing 3 10s instead of the number 3, what they did was they added the numbers 3 and 2 together rather than building out the number 32. So this allows me to see that this student really needs more work with basic place value knowledge. I need to go back to the beginning. I need to go back to the basics and working on explaining that 10 ones is the same thing as a 10 and how we can exchange 10 ones to make a tens block. So this allows me to see what misconceptions this student has that I can go back and work on with them in a one-on-one setting or at the small group table. So now you might be wondering, okay, Marcy, like all of this sounds really great, but I don't have time to take notes on each of my kids every single day. So when am I supposed to do this? And the answer is there's no magical time that you should take anecdotal notes during your guided math lesson. As I mentioned before, they can be taken during independent practice, your small group instruction, or even during their math station time. So typically, this is going to be different in every classroom setting. Some school districts, they might want you to take notes every other day on your student. Maybe they want you to take notes once a week. My goal was to at least get one note for every single student once a week. Now, my lower level students that I work with and see more often, I might try to take at least 2 notes a week. But whenever I say that these observations are short and sweet, like I might be just kind of jotting down notes as we're doing our lesson at the small group table. So you don't specifically have to take time out of your day and pull kids off to the side to take and observe notes on them. Maybe I might jot down a couple of things after I wrap up a small group lesson and I jot down a couple of notes about how that lesson went and what I want to work on the next time. So my goal and my advice would be to you is to try to at least get 1 note per student every week. After I get done with my note taking, I store all of them inside my guided math binder, which I shared all about in a previous video. So be sure to head over and check that one out after this if you have not already. Inside my guided math binder, I have a section labeled observations. In here, this is where I keep all of my blank note-taking templates. I have half-page templates, and I also have full page options. And then after I take notes, what I do is I actually put them in the section that I have for each group. So if the student that I just took is in my tiger group, then I put that note in that group section so that I always have it to reference and look back on. And then all of my notes are nice and neat in one place. So they are all stored in my guided math binder. If you're interested in checking this out, I've left a link below in the description. You can also use just a plain notebook to keep track of your notes with your students. You can use sticky notes. If you use sticky notes, just make sure you keep everything in a centralized location so that you don't lose them like I probably would. So that is it. There are some suggestions on how to take anecdotal notes in your classroom. I would love to hear more about how you take notes and how you use them with your students. So please feel free to drop me a comment below. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button because I'll have a brand new video coming at you next week. I hope you have a blessed one, and we will talk later. Bye.